Today I'll be deriving chain rule. So let's have an h of x equals f where g of x is inside it. Alright, so what's h prime of x? H prime of x would equal lim. I'm gonna ignore the limits in the future because that's tedious to write. It would be lim as h approaches 0, h prime of x, no, h of x plus h minus h of x over h. And these h's are different. This represents a function, this represents some arbitrary letter that approaches 0. This can be rewritten as, look, so this x right here corresponds to that x right here, and these functions correspond together, right? So we just have to transfer this x plus h to that, because these two functions are both a function of x. So this would also work for it, and that would also work for it. So we get that h prime of x also equals f of g of x plus h, because they're both a function of x, and we can just plug it in, minus f of g of x over h. But now, how is f prime of g of x different than the derivative of h of x? Well, f prime of g of x, what this is telling us is that there's some graph, I'm going to write here, right? There's some graph f, and there's some graph g, and g of x is the domain. So x is not the domain of f. And what this is saying is not that x is the domain of f, but g of x is the domain of f. So to calculate the slope of this, what this is asking for is the slope of f of x with respect to g of x. And hopefully that should make sense, and yeah. So this would equal, well, f of g of x plus h minus f of g of x, right? Because a function of g here, over g of x plus h minus g of x as h approaches 0. Remember, the bottom part isn't h anymore because this is a function of g of x, not of x, all right? And as for the derivative of g prime of x, oh, that's just simple. That's just g of x plus h minus g of x over h. And look here. What happens when we multiply this to this? Let that simmer in for a second. This cancels out with that. So in the end, we get that f prime of g of x times g prime of x equals, well, f of g of x plus h minus f of g of x over h. And look, that just equals h prime of x. Because look what h prime of x equals. Look what f prime g of x times g prime of x equals. So the main concept you need to understand here is that the derivative of this does not equal the derivative of that. Because h prime of x is a function of x, but f prime of g of x is a function of g of x, or it's f of x with respect to g of x, while h is respect to x. Alright? So that's the proof of chain rule. And with chain rule, we can prove the division rule, which I'll do in my next video.